Okay, so to start off this demo, I first want to show you what a typical conversation might look like with the chatbot. And so in this example, I said, this is what Claude Code told me, how do I do the steps? And it gives me 8 wonderful steps, easy to follow. And what I realize is automatically I have an issue, like I don't have Docker, and then it kind of goes into this tangent about Docker, and then I start asking questions. Oh, can I have Docker installed? Why do I need it for Postgres? What is the difference? All these things. And then once I'm done with that, I have to scroll all the way back up and kind of do the next thing, which is this npx command, which I end up having issues with. And it creates this very disorganized schema that is sometimes frustrating and not so clear, right? So that's kind of the problem that I aimed to want to solve with Twix. And so if we just look at an example, I think you'll grasp the concept. So let's take that I say, pretend you're a LeetCode tutor to this chatbot. You aid but do not give direct answers, and just help me solve this LeetCode question word break, right? So it gives me a very wonderful response. But I'm reading this and I realize I actually don't know dynamic programming. So I highlight this and I'm able to open a tangent, right? Which is exactly what I did here. And I say, I don't know how to dynamic program. Can you give me a question and I'll send you my code? So it gives me a simple Fibonacci question and I give it my code. And the way I kind of was able to write this code is instead of having to go to an IDE or something, you know, fidget with the whole setup process, I can click this button, copy in my Python code, and then even run it and test it, right? So I sent my code and it said, good start, but this isn't actually that efficient. So I'm like, can you give me the more efficient algorithm? Which in my case, my space was O of n, but in this case, the space is O of 1 because they're just using two variables. So the awesome thing is it gives me this code and I can even interact with it again. So I can click run, I can see Fibonacci of 11, and then I can go back and reset it. So this is great, wonderful, right? It's simple enough. But let's say like I keep seeing these things time and space and I'm like, I don't even know what this means. So I can actually open up a tangent, go even further down, open a tangent from a tangent. So I'm like, I don't get this. And the thing is, whenever we open up a tangent, it inherits all of the parent's context. So even though I just highlighted the word time, it's going to know that we're working on like a dynamic programming question and we're talking about the Fibonacci sequence. And so with all that information, it's going to give me a relevant response. And so, like I said, it referred to the fact that we were talking about Fibonacci. Okay, wonderful. But I'm also looking at this and I also don't understand space. So I'm like, can you explain this? And so the idea is from one parent, you can have many children, many different tangents, and those tangents can have subtangents from them as well, right? Because that's how a lot of our thinking typically follows. And, there's a lot of bouncing around inspiration that comes from different words and ideas or questions that we have. And this type of platform allows for that sort of thinking. And so let's say like I get this space-time response and I actually think, this is something I want to save because this is really interesting. So I can actually click merge, right? So I'm going to merge, and when I click merge, you're going to see that our entire conversation actually gets merged into our talk. And then if I click time, I can actually, instead of merging, I can branch it. Maybe I want to go more into time and I don't want to keep it here. I mean, I can also go back to the main thing if I'm not interested in seeing that, but I can click branch. And what's going to happen is when I click branch, it's going to create its own conversation, totally separate from the parent. And so that kind of allows me to go back and I can keep what's relevant. So that was like kind of a great glimpse of what my website does and kind of the goals of it, but there are applications beyond just coding or asking general questions. And so another example was like, hey, can you write me an AI newsletter? And it gave me this bare bones newsletter and I asked it, hey, like I don't really like this title, can you give me 10 different options? And so I had this conversation, I merged it back in, and then I was also like, I don't really like this particular, or I think it was this particular fact, let's find a different one and replace it. And so we found a new fact, this anthropic one, and I told it to save it. And if you see, it replaced the title accurately when I asked it to update my newsletter, and it also added in the anthropic fact that I was interested in. So this is another idea of when we do document editing, especially with chatbots right now, it's very easy to get lost in context and actually requires us to have multiple different browsers open where we save the context and we ask chatbots kind of direct questions. But with something like this, we can go off, focus on one part that we might want to change, and then merge those changes and merge that context back in when it's relevant. And so that's kind of two big ideas. But if you notice in the previous one, I had this integration with something called a sandbox via this service called E2B, and I wanted to explore the capabilities of that even more. And so what I did is I asked it to clone a GitHub repository. So this is me asking to find a GitHub repository from the web. It finds it and it clones it. There's a little bit of movie magic here because it does take a while, but I can click and I can see all the files just to get a glimpse. Now I can ask it to actually start the repo. And so it starts the dev server. This is all in a sandbox location, so not running on my computer. It's in the cloud, and it starts the live link. I can actually even ask it to make changes in natural language. So I'm like, hey, can you change it to say hello 10x team? And within a few seconds, thanks to Movie Magic, it makes the change. And this is kind of a nod to other companies that I've been inspired by, like smartgoals.dev, and the idea of having word and natural language coding via browsers. Okay, so now I want to take a look at the code. This code was written pretty much entirely by Claude Code with a little bit of human intervention. There's two main important files. All of the code related to the sandbox is mainly in this file E2B. So I'm using this platform called E2B, which provides a sandbox environment that's essentially kind of like compute and gives us the ability to build out a bunch of different tools. Read a sandbox file, write to a file. So there's a bunch of these tools that we defined. And then using Vercel's AI SDK, the AI figures out when it's relevant to call the tools. Okay, so the second part is when we have that tangent chat, right? So the first thing is we're going to run a query to get all of the context. This is a big query and we're running it via Prisma. Once we have that, if we do decide to create a tangent, then we're going to inherit the parent's context up until the point where we break it off. And so that's really what's happening in these lines. However, even with that parent's context, we want to tell the system, hey, focus on whatever the user has highlighted. So that's creating a tangent. But now, what if we want to merge a tangent back? The first thing is we create a bundle, summary of the message and its content. And what we do is we link this to the parent ID, which is basically the place in the parent where we want to insert the merged chat. We create that bundle, and then what we do is we go through and we interweave it. So we create this entire big new parent context with that's chronological and makes sense. Database that I'm running, since it's hosted, I'm using Vercel for hosting, and then I'm using a cloud Postgres database via a service called Neon, which is also very straightforward. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys understand and see the vision for kind of these tangent chats.